The world of medieval medicine was a strange and often terrifying place where the lines between science, superstition, and religion blurred into a confusing tapestry of healing practices. For over 1,000 years, from the fall of Rome to the dawn of the Renaissance, physicians and healers relied on a mix of ancient wisdom, folk remedies, and spiritual beliefs to treat the sick and injured. This was an era when the human body was poorly understood, when diseases were mysterious forces to be feared, and when the cure could sometimes be worse than the ailment itself. At the heart of medieval medicine lay the theory of the four humors, a concept inherited from the ancient Greeks and Romans. Physicians believed that the body contained four vital fluids: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, and that health depended on keeping these humors in perfect balance. When someone fell ill, it was thought to be caused by an excess or deficiency of one of these substances. The treatments developed to restore this balance were often drastic and painful. Bloodletting became one of the most common procedures, with physicians using lancets or leeches to drain what they believed was excess blood from their patients. Other methods included purging to remove bile or inducing vomiting to clear phlegm. These practices persisted for centuries, despite their frequent ineffectiveness and sometimes deadly consequences. The training of medieval physicians was vastly different from modern medical education. Most learned their craft not through hands-on experience with patients, but through the study of ancient texts, particularly the works of Galen, a Greek physician whose writings became medical dogma in the Middle Ages. These texts were copied and recopied by monks in monasteries, with each generation preserving both the wisdom and the errors of their predecessors. University medical schools began appearing in Europe during the 12th and 13th centuries. But even there, students spent more time debating ancient theories than examining actual patients. Dissection of human bodies was rare and often conducted more as a demonstration of known facts than as a means of discovery. Diagnosing illness in the Middle Ages was an art that relied on methods that seemed bizarre to modern eyes. Physicians placed great stock in uroscopy, the examination of a patient's urine. They would carefully study the color, consistency, smell, and even taste of urine, comparing it to elaborate charts that supposedly revealed the nature of the illness. Astrology also played a significant role in diagnosis and treatment. Medieval doctors believed that the positions of the planets and stars influenced human health, with different signs of the zodiac governing various parts of the body. Treatment schedules were often determined by astrological calculations rather than by the patient's actual condition. Surgery in medieval times was a last resort, performed only when all other treatments had failed. Without anesthesia beyond alcohol or herbal sedatives, operations were excruciating ordeals. Barber surgeons, who combined haircutting with simple surgical procedures, would amputate limbs, remove arrowheads, or drain abscesses with crude instruments that were rarely cleaned properly. Infection was almost inevitable, and survival rates were low. One of the most extreme procedures was trepanation, the drilling of holes in the skull to relieve pressure or release evil spirits thought to cause mental illness. Remarkably, some patients did survive these primitive operations, as evidenced by archaeological finds of healed trepan skulls. The pharmacy of medieval Europe was filled with substances we now know to be toxic. Mercury was used to treat syphilis, arsenic for fevers, and lead compounds for skin conditions. Herbal preparations sometimes contained deadly nightshade or hemlock in dangerous quantities. Even safe remedies could be harmful, when prepared incorrectly. The line between medicine and poison was dangerously thin, and many patients died from their treatments rather than their diseases. Yet amid these dangers, some effective herbal remedies were developed. Willow bark for pain, a precursor to aspirin, honey for wound care, and certain digestive aids that still have merit today. The Church played a central role in medieval medicine, with many treatments blending physical and spiritual healing. Saints became associated with specific ailments: Saint Anthony for ergotism, Saint Roch for plague. Relics were applied to wounds, holy water was consumed as medicine, and pilgrimages to shrines were prescribed for chronic conditions. Monasteries served as early hospitals, where monks combined herbal remedies with prayer. Some religious orders specialized in care for particular illnesses, like the Order of St. Lazarus, which treated leprosy. This fusion of medicine and faith gave comfort to many, even when the treatments lacked scientific basis. While excluded from formal medical education, women played crucial roles as healers, particularly in childbirth and women's health. Midwives passed down generations of practical knowledge about delivery and neonatal care. Herbalists, often older women, prepared remedies for female complaints. Some female mystics gained fame as healers through visions and prayers. However, these practitioners operated in constant danger. Successful healers might be revered, but failures could be accused of witchcraft. The Church increasingly sought to control women's medical practice, seeing it as competition to clerical authority. When the Black Death struck in 1347, medieval medicine was utterly powerless. Physicians in beaked masks, stuffed with herbs, could do little as entire cities perished. Some blamed the disease on bad air, others saw it as divine punishment. Treatments ranged from useless, burning aromatic woods, to dangerous, drinking molten gold. The death toll forced re-evaluation of medical theories and public health measures. Quarantines were implemented, sanitation improved, and the first isolation hospitals appeared. The plague's devastation ultimately helped break medicine's reliance on ancient authorities, paving the way for new approaches. The rise of universities and medical schools in the 12th century marked the beginning of formal medical education in Europe. Students studied Galen and Hippocrates for years before limited clinical experience. Dissections, when permitted, were rare public events where professors read from ancient texts while a demonstrator pointed at organs. These schools created a professional class of physicians, though their book learning often left them less practical than barber surgeons. The tension between theoretical and practical medicine would persist for centuries. While Europe struggled through the Dark Ages, Islamic scholars preserved and advanced medical knowledge. Figures like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, wrote comprehensive medical texts that later reached Europe through Spain and Sicily. Arabic innovations included systematic clinical trials, advanced surgical techniques, and the establishment of true hospitals. European physicians slowly adopted these ideas, though often mixed with their own superstitions. The transfer of this knowledge helped revive Western medicine. The first recognizable hospitals emerged in the High Middle Ages, growing from monastic infirmaries into specialized institutions. These early hospitals focused on spiritual comfort as much as physical treatment, with daily masses and strict religious observance. Over time, some developed specialized wards and more systematic care, laying groundwork for modern medical institutions. The organizational models developed in these medieval hospitals would influence healthcare for centuries to come. Most surgical procedures were performed by barber surgeons, who combined haircutting with bloodletting, tooth extraction, and basic operations. Organized into guilds, they learned through apprenticeship rather than formal study. Their red and white striped poles, symbolizing blood and bandages, remain a barbershop symbol today. Though often mocked by university-trained physicians, barber surgeons developed practical skills that saved lives on battlefields and in towns. Their gradual professionalization would lead to modern surgical practice. War drove many medical advances during the medieval period. Surgeons developed better techniques for arrow removal, amputation, and wound care. The use of cautery to prevent bleeding became widespread. Some armies employed field hospitals, while others left wounded to die. The Crusades exposed European physicians to Arabic medical knowledge, while constant warfare provided grisly opportunities to refine techniques. Military surgeons became among the most experienced practitioners, though their methods remained excruciating without proper anesthesia. By the late Middle Ages, cracks appeared in Galenic medicine. Some physicians noted inconsistencies between ancient texts and actual observations. The Black Death's devastation undermined faith in traditional approaches. Newly translated Arabic works offered alternative perspectives. Dissections revealed Galen's anatomical errors. This growing skepticism would explode during the Renaissance, as figures like Paracelsus rejected humoral theory entirely, and Vesalius published accurate anatomical studies. Beyond official medicine, a rich tradition of herbal healing persisted. Monastic gardens cultivated medicinal plants, while village-wise women used local flora. Some remedies had real efficacy: digitalis for heart symptoms, chamomile for digestion. Others were pure superstition. Mandrake roots shaped like humans were prized, despite being poisonous. This folk knowledge represented an alternative medical tradition that sometimes proved more effective than academic medicine. The 15th century brought several developments that signaled medicine's coming transformation. The printing press allowed wider dissemination of medical texts. Increased dissection improved anatomical knowledge. Observation began supplementing ancient authorities. While medieval medicine would persist in places for centuries, its foundations were crumbling. The stage was set for the scientific revolution that would give birth to modern medicine. The story of medieval medicine is one of both tragedy and slow progress. For centuries, patients suffered under misguided theories and dangerous treatments. Yet within this darkness, glimmers of real advancement appeared, the beginnings of hospitals, the preservation of ancient knowledge, the first tentative steps toward evidence-based practice. Today, we can look back with horror at bloodletting and trepanation, but also with appreciation for those healers who did their best with limited knowledge. Their failures taught valuable lessons. Their successes laid foundations. Their enduring commitment to healing represents medicine's timeless human dimension. The transition from medieval to modern medicine was slow and uneven, with old beliefs persisting alongside new discoveries. Some monasteries continued herbal traditions, while universities incorporated empirical approaches. The growing trade in medicinal spices connected Europe to distant lands, introducing new treatments. Medical texts began including observations from actual cases, rather than just repeating ancient authorities. This period of transition set the stage for scientific medicine. One significant development was gradual acceptance of human dissection for medical education. While initially controversial, by the late Middle Ages, some universities allowed limited dissections, usually of executed criminals. These first explorations of human anatomy revealed Galen's errors and started a medical revolution. Hospitals evolved from places of simple care to institutions where observation and treatment occurred. The Black Death forced communities to develop early public health measures like quarantines and sanitation rules. The end of the medieval period saw medicine at a crossroads. The old humoral theory still dominated, but cracks in its foundation were appearing. Physicians began valuing observation over tradition, and new technologies like the printing press allowed medical knowledge to spread more widely than ever before. The stage was set for great medical advances of the Renaissance, when figures like Vesalius would revolutionize anatomy and Paracelsus would challenge ancient dogmas. The Middle Ages may not have been a golden age of medicine, but they were a crucial period of preservation, slow accumulation of knowledge, and eventual transition to more scientific approaches. Looking back at medieval medicine today, we see both how much has changed and how many fundamental human concerns remain the same. The fear of disease, the hope for cures, the dedication of healers, these are constants throughout history. What has changed is our understanding of the body and natural world, our technological capabilities, and our methods of testing and validating treatments. The journey from medieval bloodletting to modern antibiotics was long and difficult, but every step contributed to current medical knowledge. The story of medieval medicine is ultimately one of human perseverance in face of suffering, and of slow, hard-won progress that has brought us to today's medical achievements. As we reflect on this history, we might wonder what future generations will think of our own medical practices. Just as we view medieval medicine with horror and sympathy, our descendants may view some of today's standard treatments as crude or misguided. This should not discourage us, but rather remind us that pursuit of medical knowledge is an ongoing journey, requiring both humility in recognizing limits of current understanding and determination to keep pushing those limits further. The physicians and healers of the Middle Ages, for all their mistakes, were part of this same great human endeavor to conquer disease and alleviate suffering. Their story deserves to be remembered not just as a curiosity of the past, but as an important chapter in medicine's long evolution. The study of medieval medicine also reveals how deeply medical practices are intertwined with cultural beliefs. The humoral theory reflected medieval ideas about balance in nature and society. Astrological medicine mirrored the medieval view of humans as microcosms of the universe. Religious healing practices showed the close connection between physical and spiritual health in medieval thought. These connections remind us that medicine is never just about biology. It's also about how a culture understands the body, health, and nature of healing itself. This historical perspective can help us better understand modern medical controversies and alternative healing traditions that draw on pre-scientific concepts. Perhaps the most important lesson from medieval medicine is the value of evidence-based practice. For centuries, treatments were used not because they were proven effective, but because they were traditional or theoretically plausible. The slow shift toward observation and experimentation, though incomplete in the Middle Ages, pointed the way forward. Today's emphasis on clinical trials and scientific validation represents the culmination of this long historical process. Yet even now, we sometimes repeat the medieval pattern of clinging to familiar ideas, despite contradictory evidence. The history of medieval medicine thus serves as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration, showing the dangers of dogma, but also the human capacity for growth and improvement in medical knowledge. In the end, the physicians, surgeons, and healers of the Middle Ages were doing their best with the knowledge they had. They faced enormous challenges: rampant infectious diseases, frequent injuries, limited understanding of anatomy and physiology. Yet they developed systems of care that, for all their flaws, represented real attempts to help the sick and injured. Their persistence in the face of often futile treatments demonstrates remarkable dedication. While we may be grateful to live in an age of modern medicine, we owe a debt to these medieval practitioners who kept medical knowledge alive through difficult centuries, and whose experiences, both successful and disastrous, helped pave the way for later advances. Their story is an essential part of medicine's long and still unfolding history. Would you have survived medieval medicine? The odds weren't good, but thanks to those difficult centuries of trial and error, we enjoy far better healthcare today. The strange and often terrifying world of medieval medicine reminds us how far we've come in understanding and treating disease, while also humbling us with the realization that future generations may view some of our current practices with similar disbelief. This journey through the history of medieval medicine shows us the resilience of the human spirit in the face of suffering, the slow but steady progress of scientific understanding, and the enduring human quest to alleviate pain and prolong life. From the dark ages of medicine to the brilliant advances of modern science, this story continues to unfold, with each generation building on the knowledge and learning from the mistakes of those who came before. Imagine undergoing surgery without anesthesia, with only a leather strap to bite down on as a barber surgeon sawed through your leg. Medieval operations were brutal, performed with tools better suited to carpentry than medicine. The most common procedures: amputations, arrow removals, and trepanation, drilling holes in the skull, were excruciating. Infection was almost guaranteed, as instruments were rarely cleaned. Yet some patients survived, their healed bones found by archaeologists, proving both human resilience and the occasional success of these barbaric methods. The deadly pharmacy. Medieval apothecaries stocked remedies that could kill as easily as cure. Mercury treated syphilis, arsenic cured fevers, and lead compounds were applied to wounds. Even herbal mixtures sometimes contained deadly nightshade or hemlock. Yet amid these poisons, some legitimate cures emerged: willow bark, nature's aspirin, for pain, honey for infections, and digestive tonics still used today. The line between healer and poisoner was frighteningly thin. Women healers, knowledge and danger. Excluded from universities, women practiced medicine through midwifery and herbalism. Skilled midwives delivered babies using techniques passed through generations. Wise women brewed effective remedies from local plants. But their success came with risk. Accusations of witchcraft loomed over any healer, especially women. The Church increasingly sought to control women's medical roles, seeing them as threats to clerical authority. The Black Death's medical failure. When plague struck in 1347, medieval medicine collapsed. Physicians in beaked masks stuffed with herbs were powerless. Treatments ranged from useless, burning aromatic woods, to deadly, drinking molten gold. The devastation killed a third of Europe, but forced medical evolution. Quarantines, sanitation laws, and the first isolation hospitals emerged from the crisis. From superstition to science. By the 15th century, cracks appeared in medieval medicine's foundations. Dissections proved Galen's anatomy wrong. The printing press spread new ideas. Physicians began valuing observation over ancient texts. Though change came slowly, these developments paved the way for Renaissance medicine, proving even the darkest medical ages eventually give way to light. A legacy of suffering and progress. Medieval medicine was often more harmful than helpful, yet within its failures lay seeds of modern practice. Early hospitals, surgical techniques, and herbal knowledge survived the era. Today we shudder at bloodletting and trepanation, but we owe medieval healers a debt. Their desperate experiments, though frequently misguided, were steps toward the scientific medicine we cherish today. Given medieval cures, most modern patients wouldn't last a week. Yet understanding this history makes us appreciate today's medicine and wonder what future generations will find barbaric about our current treatments. The story continues, with each era building on the last in humanity's endless quest to conquer disease. The terrifying reality of medieval medicine reminds us how far we've come. Where once we bled patients to balance imaginary humors, we now target diseases at the molecular level. Yet for all its horrors, this era preserved crucial medical knowledge through dark times. Those grim-faced plague doctors stumbling through corpse-filled streets were actually early pioneers of infection control, their beaked masks precursors to modern PPE. Their failures taught us what doesn't work, paving the way for evidence-based medicine. Consider the medieval surgeon's toolkit: rusty saws, red-hot cautery irons, and bone-cracking trepanation drills. Today's sterile operating theaters with laser-guided instruments show just how revolutionary our progress has been. The herbal knowledge painstakingly recorded by monastic healers still informs modern pharmacology. Many folk remedies contained active compounds we now isolate in laboratories. Nature's pharmacy, waiting to be understood. Medieval hospitals, for all their primitive care, established the blueprint for modern healthcare institutions. Their very existence acknowledged society's responsibility to care for the sick, a radical idea at the time. The Black Death's devastation forced the first public health measures: quarantines, travel restrictions, and isolation protocols eerily similar to those we used during recent pandemics. Some solutions transcend centuries. Women healers, though persecuted as witches, preserved vital medical wisdom when formal medicine failed. Their legacy lives on in midwifery and holistic approaches now gaining scientific validation. The transition from astrology-based diagnosis to evidence-based medicine shows humanity's slow awakening to rational thought. We're still on that journey today, learning which modern practices will someday seem medieval. Those grotesque urine inspection wheels represented genuine attempts at diagnostic testing, crude ancestors of today's lab equipment. Even misguided efforts can point toward better solutions. The medieval fusion of spiritual and physical healing reminds us that effective treatment must address the whole person. A lesson modern medicine sometimes forgets in its technological focus. As we digitize healthcare with AI and nanotechnology, we do well to remember medicine's human roots. The best healers, medieval or modern, combine knowledge with compassion. Future generations will surely view some of our current treatments as barbaric. That's the nature of medical progress. Each breakthrough makes former miracles seem primitive. The real tragedy of medieval medicine wasn't its ignorance, but how long it took to challenge established dogmas. That cautionary tale remains relevant in today's medical controversies. Yet for all its flaws, medieval medicine kept the flame of healing alive through Europe's darkest centuries. Without those stubborn practitioners, modern medicine might not exist. So as we shudder at their methods, we should also salute their perseverance. Their failures were necessary steps toward our successes, and our advanced medicine will one day seem just as quaint. The dark side of progress. For every medieval bloodletting session, there's a modern overprescribed antibiotic. Have we really moved past dangerous treatments, or just replaced them with new risks? The witch healers we ignored. Medieval women healers were burned as witches for using science we now accept. Makes you wonder, what medical wisdom are we dismissing today because it challenges tradition? Plague doctors versus COVID deniers. Asterisk, even 14th century plague doctors understood contagion better than some modern anti-maskers. Sometimes, history's primitives were ahead of their time and our own. Asterisk, the hospital's twisted origins. Medieval hospitals were more about saving souls than bodies. Yet from these grim halls grew modern ICUs. The line between faith and science has always been blurry. Leeches are back, seriously. Modern surgeons now use leeches for microsurgery, proving even the craziest medieval remedies sometimes held hidden wisdom. What other barbaric treatments might return? The real cost of medical dogma. It took 1,200 years to question Galen's errors. How many patients suffered because medicine refused to challenge tradition? A warning for today's rigid medical systems. Your phone is the new urine wheel. Medieval doctors diagnosed illness by staring at pee. Now we trust AI apps to do the same. Plus cut change, the pain we no longer endure. A medieval tooth extraction meant brute force and agony. Next time you dread the dentist, remember, history makes even root canals look luxurious. Religion versus reality. Prayer was medieval medicine's placebo effect. Today, we call it mind-body healing and study it in labs. Some superstitions turn out to be science in disguise. The future will judge us too. We laugh at mercury cures, but future docs may gasp at chemotherapy. Progress means realizing today's miracles are tomorrow's horrors. The dirty truth about cleanliness. Medieval streets were open sewers, yet surgeons didn't wash their tools. Sound familiar? Some hospitals still struggle with basic hygiene. The first clinical trials. Arabic doctors tested treatments systematically, while Europe bled patients for fun. A reminder, medical progress depends on who's allowed to innovate. Your herbal tea's dark history. That natural remedy in your cupboard? Its recipe might trace back to a medieval nun who risked execution for practicing medicine without a license. The myth of the good old days. Nostalgia for traditional medicine ignores one fact. Your odds of surviving a fever were worse than a coin flip until about 1920. The hidden costs of progress. Modern medicine scoffs at medieval bloodletting, Yet we've created our own dangerous trends: opioid epidemics, antibiotic overuse, and profit-driven overtreatment. Are we really so different from those medieval apothecaries peddling mercury tonics? The tools have changed, but human nature hasn't. The persecution of women healers. When male physicians took over medicine, they systematically destroyed centuries of women's healing knowledge. What medical breakthroughs died with the witches burned at the stake? Their herbal remedies and midwifery skills often proved more effective than the brutal practices of licensed doctors. Pandemic parallels. The Black Death revealed medieval medicine's failures, just as COVID-19 exposed modern healthcare's cracks. Both eras saw desperate people turning to unproven treatments, from plague-era arsenic drinks to hydroxychloroquine hype. History doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes. The hospital-industrial complex. What began as monastic hospices for the dying have become trillion-dollar corporations. The medieval church controlled healing through relics and prayers. Today's hospitals prioritize profits over patients. Have we simply swapped one form of institutional control for another? Alternative medicine's dark roots. That trendy herbal supplement? Its recipe likely comes from medieval texts, where it was prescribed alongside spells and astrology. Modern wellness culture has rebranded ancient superstitions with Instagram aesthetics. The beaked plague mask, replaced by jade rollers and aura readings. The myth of medical authority. Medieval doctors wore elaborate robes to project expertise they didn't actually possess. Today's white coats and framed diplomas serve the same purpose. Both eras show how easily credentials can become costumes disguising uncertainty. Surgical showmanship. Medieval surgeons operated in public theaters to prove their skill. Modern surgeons film procedures for social media clout. The spectacle of medicine remains unchanged. Only the platforms have evolved, from town squares to TikTok. The placebo paradox. Medieval patients improved after drinking holy water from saintly relics. Today's clinical trials struggle to outperform sugar pills. The power of belief has outlasted every medical revolution and still defies scientific explanation. Genetic time bombs. Centuries of royal families practicing medieval medicine's cousin. Political incest left European monarchs with hemophilia and madness. Our modern obsession with genetic engineering may create new dynasties of design diseases we can't yet imagine. The future's judgment. In 2523, medical students will laugh at our primitive keyhole surgeries and chemotherapy, just as we scoff at medieval cauterization. True progress means accepting that today's cutting-edge treatments are tomorrow's barbarism. Imagine being a mother in 12th century England, watching your child burn with fever. You've tried the village wise woman's herbs, said prayers to St. Roch, and even paid the traveling barber surgeon to bleed little Thomas. As you kneel by his straw mattress, wiping his brow with a cloth dipped in rose water and vinegar, you wonder, why isn't God listening? This was the heartbreaking reality of medieval medicine, not just a collection of bizarre practices, but desperate human attempts to make sense of suffering in a world without answers. The barber surgeon's hands, a human portrait. Jacques the barber surgeon didn't set out to hurt people. The calluses on his hands told the story of 20 years spent pulling teeth, setting bones, and yes, performing those terrifying amputations. He remembered his first operation, a farmer's crushed leg after a cart accident. The scream still haunted his dreams, but so did the look in the man's eyes when he survived. People think we were butchers, Jacques might say if he could speak to us today. But when your choices are try or watch them die, you learn to steady your hands. His leather apron, stained brown with old blood, bore witness to hundreds of such impossible decisions. The herbalist's secret, women's lost wisdom. In the shadow of the cathedral, old Margaret gathered yarrow and comfrey at dawn. The priests called her a witch, but mothers came anyway when the fevers came. She remembered which villages had the coughing sickness last winter, which herbs made the redness around wounds fade. When the church burned her book of remedies in 1382, 3 generations of knowledge turned to ash in minutes. But Margaret had taught her granddaughter the recipes in whispers, how to steep willow bark for pain, how to pack wounds with honey. The earth gives us answers, she'd say, if we're brave enough to listen past the priests. A doctor's crisis of faith. Master physician Yang d'Avignon stared at the urine flask in his hands. 40 years studying Galen's texts, and still the plague took his wife in 3 agonizing days. The elaborate astrological charts he'd consulted, the careful balancing of humors, none of it mattered when death came knocking. That night, he did something forbidden. He cut open a plague victim's body, not to lecture students about the 4 humors, but to look. The blackened lungs, the swollen nodes, there had to be answers in the flesh itself. His trembling hands, stained with mortality, began a quiet revolution. The patient's prayer. Young Eleanor of Aquitaine knelt on cold stone, pressing her forehead against St. Anthony's relic. The monks said her twisted leg was God's punishment for her father's sins. But when the traveling surgeon offered to break and reset the bone, she clenched her teeth and nodded. The pain was worse than childbirth, but Eleanor would walk straight again. As the wound festered, she dreamed of dancing. When the fever came, she whispered the names of her children like a rosary. This was medicine's forgotten truth. Behind every ancient treatment was someone praying to live. A letter across time. If we could send one message to those medieval healers, it shouldn't be laughter at their methods. It should be, you are wrong about so much, but right about what matters. That healing requires courage. That the body wants to live. That sometimes, just showing up with clean hands and a steady heart is the most powerful medicine of all. Jacques Journal, May 12, 1348. Another day, another dozen souls begging for relief from this cursed plague. Young Marie Dubois came today, sweet girl, no older than my own daughter. The black buboes under her arms had begun to weep. I did what I could, lanced the swellings, applied the poultice of crushed garlic and pigeon dung. God forgive me. I know it does nothing. When she screamed as the hot iron sealed the wounds, her mother clutched my arms so tight her nails drew blood. Do something, she begged. But what use are my tools against God's wrath? The priest says we're being punished. Then why do the good die while scoundrels like that drunken Lord Renard still draw breath? June 3rd, 1348. Ran out of vinegar for cleansing wounds today. Used strong ale instead. Old Margaret, the herb wife, claims a poultice of moldy bread helps when wounds turn foul. Madness, yet I've seen it work twice now. If the church finds out, I'm using a witch's remedies. Found Thomas the blacksmith dead in his shop this morning. His hands still clutched that strange metal contraption he'd been building. 2 glass lenses in a wooden frame. Helps see the humors in blood, he told me last week. Now he's gone, and another half-formed idea lost to this damned pestilence. June 29th, 1348. My wife Isabel took ill at dawn. The fever burns her from within, like a candle flame guttering out. I, who have cut open 100 bodies, cannot bear to look at her sweating face. She smiles still, whispers that our daughter mustn't come near. I've bled nobles and peasants alike, but Christ have mercy. I cannot bring myself to take the lancet to her pale arm. Instead, I sit here writing while she sleeps, the useless leather-bound gallon text gathering dust beside me. What good are 4 humors against death himself? October 1st, 1352. The pestilence has passed, though half the village lies beneath the new mound in the churchyard, including Isabel. Today I used Thomas' lens device on a drop of well water. Saw creatures swimming in it, tiny wriggling beasts. Could these be the invisible demons that spread the plague? The priest says it's heresy to suggest God would make such abominations. But I must know. I've begun boiling my instruments before use. The others laugh, but none of my last 20 patients have died. Perhaps the answers were never in the stars, but in things too small for the naked eye. The brutal and hopeful world of medieval medicine. Medieval medicine was a paradox, a blend of ancient wisdom, desperate experimentation, and deep-seated superstition. At its core lay the theory of the 4 humors, inherited from the Greeks: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Physicians believed illness arose from imbalances in these fluids, leading to treatments that often did more harm than good. Bloodletting, the most common remedy, was performed with grim regularity, training patients until they fainted or worse. Yet for all its flaws, this system was not just blind cruelty. It was an attempt, however misguided, to bring order to the chaos of disease in a world without microscopes, antibiotics, or even basic hygiene. Imagine the barber surgeon, a man whose trade straddled the line between healer and butcher. His tools, rusty lancets, bone saws, and cautery irons, were as likely to kill as to cure. Surgery was a last resort, performed without anesthesia, where the best hope was a quick hand and a strong stomach. Infections were inevitable, and the stench of rotting flesh haunted every infirmary. Yet, some patients survived, their bodies healing despite the brutality of their treatment. These rare successes kept the practice alive, a testament to human resilience in the face of suffering. Women, though excluded from formal medical training, played a crucial role as healers. Midwives guided childbirth with knowledge, passed through generations, while herb wives brewed poultices from plants gathered in the forest. Their remedies, willow bark for pain, honey for wounds, sometimes worked better than the learned physician's potions. But their wisdom came at a price. A difficult birth or a failed cure could see them branded as witches, their hard-earned knowledge lost to the flames of superstition and fear. The Black Death exposed the fragility of medieval medicine. When the plague arrived in 1347, physicians stood helpless. They donned beaked masks stuffed with herbs, burned foul-smelling incense, and bled patients in vain attempts to drive out the sickness. None of it worked. Villages were wiped out, corpses piled in the streets, and the survivors turned to prayer, magic, or despair. Yet from this horror came unexpected change. The old certainties crumbled, making way for new ideas. Quarantines were enforced, sanitation improved, and some began to question the rigid doctrines of Galen and Hippocrates. By the late Middle Ages, cracks were forming in the ancient medical dogma. Dissections, though rare, revealed errors in classical texts. Travel and trade brought knowledge from Islamic scholars, who had preserved and expanded upon Greek medicine. The printing press allowed new ideas to spread, and slowly, painfully, the first glimmers of modern science emerged. Looking back, it's easy to dismiss medieval medicine as barbaric, but behind every bloodletting, every failed remedy, was a person trying, however imperfectly, to ease suffering. Their mistakes taught us what doesn't work, and their rare successes hinted at truths we now take for granted. Medicine has always been a story of trial and error, of hope and heartbreak. The medieval era was no different, just another chapter in humanity's endless struggle against disease and death. The ancient war between humans and microbes. For thousands of years, doctors fought invisible enemies they couldn't comprehend. The Egyptians blamed intestinal worms on angry gods. Greek physicians believed epilepsy was divine possession. Roman healers treated gangrene with spells and frog bile. Yet amidst the superstition, glimmers of real medical insight emerged. Hippocrates' observation that diseases had natural causes. Islamic scholars inventing quarantine during the 8th century Black Death. Medieval surgeons discovering, by accident, that wine-drenched bandages prevented infection. When doctors were deadlier than disease. The history of medicine is littered with cures, worse than the ailments. 18th century mercury treatments that made patients' teeth fall out. Victorian heroic medicine that killed George Washington through bloodletting. Radium tonics sold as health elixirs in the 1920s. Yet these deadly mistakes paved the way for modern medicine. Cadaver dissections, once punishable by death, revealed human anatomy. The microscope's invention exposed the microbial world. Each failure taught us something vital. Pandemics that changed civilization. Disease didn't just kill people. It toppled empires and birthed new societies. The Antonine Plague, 165 AD, killed Rome's best legions, weakening the empire. The Black Death, 1347, created labor shortages that ended feudalism. Smallpox, 1500s, destroyed Native American civilizations more effectively than conquistadors. The forgotten heroes. History remembers the famous doctors, but what about the plague nurses who buried their own children before returning to work? Enslaved healers whose herbal knowledge saved countless lives. War surgeons operating without anesthesia on bullet-riddled soldiers. Modern lessons from ancient suffering. That medieval plague doctor's mask? The herbs inside actually worked. They filtered some bacteria. The crazy isolation hospitals of Venice? The first effective quarantine system. Our ancestors weren't stupid. They were doing their best with the knowledge they had. The scariest truth? We still face the same fundamental challenges as medieval doctors. Antibiotic-resistant superbugs. global pandemics spreading faster than cures, the eternal struggle between fear and science, the epic struggle for health, how disease and doctors shaped human civilization. From the earliest human settlements to modern megacities, our species has waged a relentless war against invisible enemies, the microbes, parasites, and ailments that have killed more people than all wars combined. This is the extraordinary, often terrifying story of how we fought back against disease with equal parts brilliance and desperation, creating the medical knowledge we take for granted today through centuries of trial, error, and unimaginable suffering. In the shadowy dawn of medicine, ancient healers grappled with forces they couldn't comprehend. Egyptian physicians documented malaria's cyclical fevers on papyrus scrolls, not knowing the mosquitoes buzzing around the Nile carried the parasite. Greek doctors in the Hippocratic tradition carefully noted symptoms while still believing illness stemmed from imbalances in mystical bodily fluids. Roman military surgeons developed remarkably advanced techniques for treating battlefield wounds, yet still prescribed drinking powdered mummy as medicine. The tension between observation and superstition would define medicine for millennia. The Middle Ages presented medicine's darkest hour and its first glimmers of light. As Europe descended into the Dark Ages, Islamic scholars in Baghdad's House of Wisdom were revolutionizing medical thought. Al-Razi's 9th century hospital in Baghdad featured separate wards for contagious diseases, while Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine became the most influential medical text for 600 years. Meanwhile, in Europe, barber surgeons performed amputations on screaming patients held down by assistants, their best pain relief being a leather strap to bite and a jug of strong wine. Yet even in this brutality, careful observers noticed patterns, that wounds washed with wine festered less, that some herbal poultices actually reduced swelling, that quarantining plague victims sometimes slowed the disease's spread. Nothing tested humanity's medical knowledge like the Black Death's apocalyptic sweep across Eurasia in the 14th century. As corpses piled in streets, desperate physicians donned haunting beaked masks filled with aromatic herbs, unknowingly creating the first crude personal protective equipment. Towns implemented brutal but effective quarantines. The Venetian system of isolating ships for 40 days, 40 giorni, giving us the word quarantine. The plague's indiscriminate slaughter of rich and poor alike began eroding blind faith in ancient medical authorities, planting seeds for the scientific revolution to come. The Renaissance brought both enlightenment and new forms of medical horror. Andreas Vesalius's clandestine dissections at Padua University revealed hundreds of errors in Galen's anatomical works, while Paracelsus pioneered the controversial idea that specific chemicals could target specific diseases. Yet this was also the era when mercury became the standard treatment for syphilis, driving patients mad before it killed them, and heroic medicine advocated bleeding patients until they lost consciousness. The 17th century discovery of microbes by Antonia van Leeuwenhoek opened new frontiers, even as doctors still prescribed therapeutic vomiting and purging for nearly every ailment. Industrialization created new health nightmares, even as it birthed modern medicine. Cholera outbreaks in filthy 19th century cities finally proved the connection between sanitation and disease, leading to revolutionary public health reforms. The development of anesthesia transformed surgery from a horror show to a healing art, while germ theory revolutionized hospital practices. Yet this progress came with dark costs. The infamous Tuskegee syphilis experiments, the thalidomide tragedy, and the ongoing struggle against antibiotic-resistant superbugs remind us that medical ethics must evolve alongside medical science. Today we stand on the shoulders of countless forgotten healers. The medieval midwife who discovered ergot could hasten labor, the battlefield surgeon who noticed clean bandages prevented gangrene, the village herbalist whose knowledge of willow bark led to aspirin. Their stories, often erased from official medical history, were just as crucial to our survival as the famous discoveries in textbooks. The history of medicine isn't just about brilliant doctors and dramatic breakthroughs. It's about humanity's collective, messy, often painful journey toward understanding our own bodies. As we face new pandemics and health challenges in the 21st century, these lessons from our medical past become vitally important. The same fear that once burned witches now fuels vaccine hesitancy. The isolation strategies developed during the Black Death were redeployed against COVID-19. And just as medieval people struggled to balance religious faith with emerging science, we now grapple with misinformation in the digital age. Our medical ancestors would likely be astonished by our technology, but they'd recognize the very human struggles behind our modern health crisis. This grand saga of medicine reveals our species at both its most vulnerable and most ingenious. From the first shamanic healer to the modern robotic surgeon, the story of healthcare is ultimately the story of human resilience. Our stubborn refusal to accept suffering as inevitable, our endless curiosity about how our bodies work, and our profound capacity for both catastrophic error and brilliant discovery in the quest for longer, healthier lives. Thanks for watching till the end. Hope this journey through medical history left you feeling grateful for modern healthcare. Stay healthy, stay curious, and maybe wash your hands extra today. Your health matters.